Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure for me to speak to this bill. Obviously, as you know, the Liberals will be voting against Bill C-31, but I thought that I would begin with the temporary foreign workers program because it's only just after question period. I moved a motion in this House which did not receive unanimous consent, unfortunately. But this motion reflects our viewpoint on this program.
In this motion, which did not receive unanimous consent, was to propose that the section of the budget implementation bill having to do with fines to be imposed on those who break the laws regarding temporary foreign workers be removed from this bill and passed immediately through all stages of the process, and so thereby become effective immediately. And this would provide another tool in the kit for the government, which is seeking to punish, if you will, those employers who are breaking the rules on temporary foreign workers. And so the government didn't like that. I guess they don't like the principle of breaking up their huge omnibus bill, no matter how much sense that might make. But this would have given the government the tools right away to deal with this problem. And this illustrates the more general point that we in the Liberal Party, while we agree with that the temporary foreign worker program should exist, we also believe that the government has been incredibly irresponsible in allowing the number of temporary foreign workers to more than double, from approximately 150 or 60,000 people when Liberals were in government to well over 300,000 today. And as we know from examples involving my former employer, Royal Bank, and also a mine in British Columbia, there have certainly been abuses of this program. And now the government has created its own mess and is trying to fix it. So we believe that many, many thousands of jobs that have been occupied by temporary foreign workers should in fact have gone to Canadians in need of work. And that is becoming more evident. It was evident from the public response to the situation involving McDonald's in Victoria. So we think the government should never have gotten into this in the first place, but now that they do have a mess to clean up, we think they should have accepted our motion so that they would have the fines which they could have imposed right away, rather than waiting weeks and weeks and weeks until this massive budget implementation bill finally passes through the House, both houses, and becomes law.
According to what I heard, the NDP wants to abolish this temporary foreign workers program, which would be stupid if it's actually true, and it reflects the attitude and the economic policy of the New Democrat Party. It shows that it lacks any kind of common sense, because what we know from experience is that in certain sectors, including agriculture, this program has been useful, and it has been, in fact, essential for a number of decades. So it is not a question of not having this program at all, but it is the case that the Conservatives have raised the numbers quite irresponsibly, and so we want to limit the program but not abolish it entirely.
Speaker of this program is that it risks taking us away from Canada's long-held immigration system, where people come in with their families, they become citizens, they have children, they vote in elections, they have grandchildren. That's how most of us, if not all of us, came to this country. But by having massive numbers of temporary foreign workers who are not, in many cases, qualified to be here, but they're taking other Canadians' jobs, we are gravitating towards a Europe-style, a Switzerland-style guest worker system where people come in for a couple of years and then they're shipped out again. And that is not and never has been the Canadian way, but I fear that is the way in which this government is taking us. I'd like to spend the rest of my limited time on two other immigration-related issues. The first is the Immigration Investor Program. And unceremoniously in this bill, I believe it's approximately 20,000 or thereabouts, applicants to the Immigrant Investor Program have been unceremoniously dumped. Yes, they're getting their fees back, but they have been waiting in many cases many years to come into this country on the basis of this program, and all of a sudden they're just cut off at the knees and have absolutely no possibility of coming to Canada under the terms of that program. And perhaps coincidentally, but it is a fact that a very high proportion of these people happen to be from China. And so naturally they are not at all happy about this. Now, I would be the first to acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, that this program, which I believe was brought in the Mulroney years, was imperfect, had deficiencies, had things that should be fixed. Instead of $800,000, which the people get back, maybe it should be $8 million. Maybe there should be a requirement for real job creation. Maybe this, maybe that. We don't have the resources of the government to design a precise program. But my point is that rather than cutting these people off the knees and throwing them out the window, the government should first develop an improved version of the program and give those who are already applicants in the old program the option of transferring to the new program. That would be fair. That would be better for Canada because those people are likely to make a major contribution to the country, especially if the requirements that are imposed on them are more onerous and more favorable to this country. So rather than proposing a little pilot program which they don't define and which we have no idea when, if ever, it will happen, the government should have done its homework first and reformed the existing program, given the applicants to the old program the opportunity to apply to the new program, and that would be the way to move our system forward in an efficient and effective manner for the sake of, primarily for the sake of Canada, but also for the sake of those who had waited many years and spent many dollars to apply to come to this country. And finally, Mr. Speaker, if I have perhaps a minute or two, I could speak to the another provision in this bill, which would extend to 20 years rather than 10 years the time that has to elapse before a newcomer is eligible for GIS. C'est-à-dire parmi les aînés.
That is, among the poorest seniors, they have to wait 20 years instead of 10 years before being eligible for this benefit.
Instead of a more general issue, where the government has decided that instead of sponsors requiring having to look after their parents for 10 years, that period of time has been extended to 20 years. And in today's volatile economy, Mr. Speaker, it does seem to me that this is an unreasonable imposition. One does not know over a period of 20 years whether one will lose one's job or whether other unfortunate things might happen. And so the bottom line is that these changes the government is imposing, it's rationing the number of parents and grandparents to be allowed into the country according to the income and the wealth of those who are applying. So I think it is a very restrictive approach, and I do not think it reflects the long positive Canadian traditions in the area of immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Minister of Employment and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I'm always amazed by the vast ignorance demonstrated by the member opposite on these matters. He just suggested that this government created the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. Let's be clear. What we call the Temporary Foreign Worker Program is essentially issuing work permits to foreign nationals coming to Canada. This has always existed. And in fact, the particular dimension of the program to which he objected, namely that of general low-skilled workers that permits people, foreign nationals, to work, for example, in the restaurant business, was introduced when? In 2004, when he was in the cabinet, Mr. Speaker. He sat around the cabinet table to introduce the general low-skilled stream about which he is now complaining. Mr. Speaker, we have not broadened the policy framework of the TFW program since coming to office. To the contrary, as any of the industry groups will tell him, we have constrained those parameters. As the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says, that's the worst thing our government has done, is to make it so difficult to bring in TFWs. The flow of TFWs coming to Canada has gone from 0.7% of workforce to 1.1% of workforce since 2005. In other words, 99% of people in the Canadian workforce are either citizens or permanent residents. We have not changed that in any meaningful way. And finally, on the GIS, is he suggesting that Canadian taxpayers should be responsible for the social costs of bringing seniors to Canada who have never lived here, paid taxes, or worked in the country? Because certainly Ruby Dalton.
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Well, with respect to the second question, the answer is not at all, and that is not what I said at all. Now, the minister can use all the vitriol and negative language he wishes, but he really misses the point. So it's not so much I who am the one devoid of facts or knowledge as himself by virtue of some of the things he just said. Because the point is not the points that he makes. The point is that under a Liberal government, as I said in my speech, we had approximately 150,000 people.
Right.
And contrary to the NDP, who wants no temporary foreign workers, we are conscious of the need for it in agriculture and other high-skilled areas. So we have nothing against the program in principle. What we do object to is the irresponsible doubling of the number of such people, more than doubling by these Conservatives under the leadership of this minister, bringing in people wildly inappropriate, causing scandals in a number of well-known companies, and now they've built their own stew, and he's doing his best to extricate himself. And if he'd accepted the motion I proposed after...
Need some time for other members. The questions and comments. Honourable Deputy to Acadie Bathurst.
The honourable member for Acadie Bathurst. Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely false what the member for Markham Unionville has just said. It is not true to say that the NDP is against this. What the NDP is against, and the minister mentioned this, is that when temporary foreign workers come here and our workers want to work, they're available to work, and the foreign workers are given precedence. But we remember that under the Liberal government in Prince Edward Island, there were people who worked 6 months. They sat at home for 6 months, and they worked 6 months on the farm in the farming sector. They'd never come to Canada before, but they wanted to stay here, and it was under that Liberal government in 2004-2005, and it's the same thing today. So he is saying that we bring temporary foreign workers here to Canada, and that we've got an unemployment rate of 16%. We've got people who want to work. They've got the training to work. They want to take jobs in Canada. That's what he's saying. It's false to say that the NDP is against temporary foreign workers, but we are against the fact that they come here and take our jobs when we have workers who are free to work.
Member for Markham Unionville.
Deputy.
What the member has just said, well, perhaps the NDP has changed its mind, and perhaps they agree with the Liberal policy now. And if that's true, I'd like to congratulate them for that, because we said about the same thing that he has just said, that we are not opposed to the program in general, but neither are we in favor of allowing temporary foreign workers to come here and take jobs that are available to Canadians who want to work. So what I said is actually what he said. At the same time, in the farming sector, as I said, and perhaps he doesn't agree with this, I know that in the agriculture sector, there is a need for these temporary foreign workers. And in certain cases, we would certainly like those temporary foreign workers to become permanent workers in Canada.